Hello and welcome. Indeed, I am very, very honored and happy to have the RBI Governor with us, interacting with students from IIT, St. Stephen's, Delhi School of Economics, LSR, Sri Ram College of Commerce. So you've got a tough bunch here. Used to be like that a few years ago, right? Well, not
many
too
years
long,
ago.
not many years. But tell me, what does it feel like? You've been now long enough as the governor, from a academic, pure academic, to a pure practitioner. Are you enjoying it?
Yes, I mean, I transitioned for a little while into another multilateral bureaucracy. This is a domestic bureaucracy.
Unilateral.
It's a very interesting situation. First, because of where the country is in.
Yes.
It's certainly work in progress. We've done a number of things, but there's a long way to go.
Right.
And one of the nice things about the Reserve Bank is you can actually do things. As opposed
independently,
to,
yes.
As opposed to advise in the case of the IMF, preach in the case of academia. Here you actually making things happen.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Absolutely.
Right, and that's a lot of pressure, but more enjoyable, is it?
Satisfaction.
So it's more
At the end of the day, when you go home, some days you feel frustrated, but many days you feel we actually accomplished something here.
Yeah. You know, one of the big advantages, I'm sure all of you will agree, is that finally we have a globally respected professional as head of the RBI, not a career bureaucrat. There were so many rumors that you may have been asked to go to the Fed. Now there's this big rumor that you're being asked to be the first chairman of the BRIC Bank. Is that true? Have you been asked?
Well, let me put it this way. First, on the previous governors, I think they were all very highly qualified professionals. If I can say this, I mean, I think the RBI has been one place we've sort of not made mistakes in terms of people we've sent there. They've been people of excellent quality. You know, there's always rumors, and I don't know where they come from. I think it's wishful thinking on the part of some people. They'd rather see me somewhere else. Let's see.
But nobody's approached you to become chairman?
It's not clear that for a bank, the BRICS Bank is actually a bank where you have to make credit decisions and you have to evaluate projects and so on. It's something that you want somebody seasoned who has some capacity to make those decisions.
Who a banker, really.
A banker.
Right, right. But I think everybody will agree that your global reputation has helped India and the Reserve Bank with you being there. Don't you agree? And a professional, it kind of, I know there have been some others like Bimal Jalan, who's an economist and a great professional, but there have been many career bureaucrats, which perhaps there should be a change, which you have initiated now?
I don't know. I mean, there are times when you need a substantial amount of reforms. An outsider is good at such times.
Right.
There are times when you need deepening, working it out, making sure that the trains run on time. Those kinds of situations are perhaps where an insider might be more effective. So it really depends on the situation.
Yes, but I suppose one thing as a professional, you've had global respect, but also you're fiercely independent, and you can be. You can keep, there's many options in life, right? So you've been talking quite openly and toughly about crony capitalism in India and the bad billionaires and how companies and stakeholders and shareholders may lose out, but somehow the promoters and owners never seem to lose out. How bad is it really in India compared to other countries?
Well, it is a phase that every country has to go through. First, we have plenty of good business people. We have plenty of good billionaires. What you have to worry about is a few people muddying the pool and making it more difficult for everybody else, including the people who have yet to scale the ladder, because they increase the cost of credit, they increase the cost of access to financial services and so on. What we've been trying to say from the Reserve Bank is debt is a sacred contract. It always has been a sacred contract in India. And if you borrow, you have to repay it.
Really?
Really. You know, the problem, of course, is with some of these people,
Thousands of crores
it's a suggestion. If you have the money, well, think about repaying, and if you don't have the money, well, suggest that your bank takes a haircut.
No.
It's contrary to the whole principle of who takes risk. The promoter has to take risk, which means he gets wiped out in bad times. It's not that he starts negotiating at that point.
Is that going to change? Are you going to change that, and how are you going to do it?
Well, there are a number of factors that I think will change this. First, there's a whole lot of public attention to concerns about crony capitalism, and failing to repay debt is one aspect. Of course,
but we've just seen in the last 2-3 weeks certain examples of individual companies getting a little bailout. I won't go into the names.
I don't think as yet. I think those, I mean, there are always suggestions floated around. I think the public policy angle has to be looked at by the government. Am I better off sort of allowing this company to go under, or is it so critical that it requires state assistance? And, you know, the United States helped out GM and Chrysler. It's not unthinkable. I'm not also saying that the United States always makes the best decisions, but it's not unthinkable. The key question is it made in a dispassionate way about whether the public interest outweighs the cost of sort of distorting capitalism.
Many people say that you should perhaps bail out industries as a whole, but not individual or companies within an industry. If an industry is going through a bad time, yes, it's fine to give them a break in some way or the other. But if an industry on the whole is doing fine, but one company is doing badly, then it's wrong to actually target that company. Like GM and Chrysler Automobile that was in a disastrous state in America.
Right. I mean, it really depends on what the cost of not taking action would be. Sometimes what happens is that you restructure in a much more efficient way. We have certain industries going through bad times, and our constant point has been, let us put them back on their feet in a more sustainable way. Let us recognize that we made mistakes, that the capital structure may be inefficient for these industries today, which means everybody has to take a hit in a fair way. Then let's go on. If that happens, I don't think that's a bad thing. Mistakes in a free market system, we make mistakes, but we have to look beyond that.
So a lot of the accusation of crony capitalism has to do with public sector banks. 75% of our banks are public sector, and kind of political pressures, crony capitalism at its height. What can you do about that? Any chance of privatization, like ICICI, what a wonderful institution it's become after becoming more private. Any chance of that?
Well, first, here again, it's not clear how much is crony capitalism, how much is mistakes, right? We've been through a period of downturn, severe downturn relative to, you know, what we were doing. 8-9% growth to 5% growth is a big change. We've seen the world economy slow down. So decisions that were made in 2008 with very little capital, with a lot of promise about revenues, with a lot of promise of effective governance, ex post didn't turn out. So there were mistakes that were made. Very hard to describe what were true mistakes and what were through influence, which you're talking about. So my personal instinct is the majority were mistakes rather than influence, but not to deny the fact that there were situations of non-transparent lending and so on, and we have some evidence of that more recently.
Yes.
That said, given that that kind of situation, we need to figure out how we can clean up governance to the extent needed in the public sector banks. There are some very good CEOs there. How can we make every CEO like the ones at the top? And for that, there are a number of ideas that are now floating around in the public realm, separating MD and chairman, getting better boards that are more focused on governance, having better pay so that we can attract the right talent to these public sector. By the way, there is a misconception that the public sector banks are typically cheaper in terms of expenses than private sector banks, because after all we underpay. Not true. In effect, the expense structure is sometimes higher than private sector banks. Really? So there's enough to do in terms of remedying what's already on the ground with some moderate changes. Because as you know, the government is looking at this in a much bigger way in the beginning of the year with this conference. And let's see what comes out of it. But my sense is there is widespread agreement that we need governance reform, that we need to figure out how they can also perform better in debt recovery. We need to figure out how they can increase capabilities. There's a whole period of hiring freezes in the public sector banks. And a lot of people, there's a missing middle in some sense, for which we need to hire or we need to increase capabilities at the lower levels much faster.
But it sounds like the old story that we will improve the public sector, we'll make it more efficient, which I've heard for 35, 40 years. And it just doesn't happen. Because you can improve public sector, you can't improve our politicians who will interfere, phone them up, threaten and, do all kinds of things because they feel they own it. I remember when we first started on television and we were on Doordarshan, we used to go and see the I&B ministry once a week, if not twice a week. Now, because we're private, we go once in 2 years, even in fact less. When will it happen that your public sector bank chairman and managing directors will not come to Delhi every week?
Right. No, it is an issue of, is there, generally speaking, too much intervention in the policies? And governments vary in how much that happens.
One worse than the other, that's
some worse than the others and some better.
Very few better.
But I think that is an issue that has to be addressed very squarely. How much do we...
No chance of privatization.
I don't know.
Because we're going back to early 70s and Indira Gandhi, which we are suffering today.
I think there are lots of possibilities ranging from at one extreme privatization across the board.
Or disinvestment.
Well, disinvestment is not quite privatization. It's reducing your stake. But full privatization where you empower the boards completely and so on.
Right.
To state ownership but empowering the boards. To staying where you are. For example, Singapore has state-linked banks, where the state still has has still the largest ownership, but it's not the majority ownership.
Right.
So you can do a lot of which looks more market-oriented in those structures. Variety of structures possible.
And I think
everything is on the table.
Would you like to see that happen?
I think everything's on the table right now. My sense is, regardless of what you actually do, improvements in governance are without any question what you have to start with. Even if you go towards the end point of privatization.
That's like, what's that, motherhood and apple pie or something? That improvement in government everybody wants. How do you do it?
So there are, clear things to do to get us away from where we are now.
Right.
Lengthen the term of management, right? Today you can get somebody who comes in for 1.5 years. That's no time to do anything serious, so lengthen the terms. The government is on board on that already. Right. Separate the managing director and chairman. Today the chairman and managing director is a complete sort of boss within, with limited checks and balances within the firm. So improve the quality of the boards, bring more professionals onto the boards. The Nayak committee has suggested setting up a bank board which will nominate people separate from the government.
Do you believe in all this? It'll happen? I mean, it'll really make a difference?
My sense is that there are countries where we have public sector banks which are doing quite well. France is one example.
I'll tell you something. It's like BBC is independent in England. Why can't Doordarshan be? We've been waiting for 50 years.
No. So you're saying that it is those countries have a different system, a different ethos, and it won't work.
Yeah. Don't you think so?
I think we have to move. Let us start moving where we can, and then see where we end up. Now, we may find this doesn't work. We may have the political consensus to move much further. Let us see.
Much further meaning privatized to some extent.
My personal view is a mixed system is not a bad thing.
Mixed meaning?
Mixed meaning having some public sector, some private sector.
Like it's 75-25 now. What would you like to see?
I would like to see something which is a little more evenly balanced.
50-50.
But I think the public sector has to be allowed to compete.
Also.
It has to be allowed to compete by freeing it to get the best talent, to take decisions in the commercial interest. So you do a bit of both.
Yes. Free the public sector, let it work, and also privatize from 75-25 to 50-50 or something like that.
Let's see what happens.
Well, we're hoping that you'll do that sort of thing. Any questions on crony capitalism? There were some issues, crony capitalism, public, here, gentleman on the left in the center there.
Hello, sir. Sir, in your book that you co-authored, Saving Capitalism from the Capitalist, you've argued about this idea of dismantling relationship capitalism in the first place. And we keep seeing these allegations come through from various political fronts about whether it's the Adanis or the Ambanis, that there is some sort of a crony capitalistic attitude that still exists within this country. Why do you think that this exists as of now when we do have, a sort of a public awakening to the extent? And how do you think the banking sector as a whole can prevent this kind of lending that happens and then dismantle the structure?
See, first, the fact that there are some very rich people doesn't necessarily imply crony capitalism, right? That people can get rich by running a more efficient enterprise, by thinking bigger, by building, taking more risks and so on. Second, I think the key issue is, did you get rich by getting the appropriate permissions, where somebody else with your capabilities could not have got it, or somebody better was kept out? Now, countries progress. They start initially, in many situations with a fairly small elite. And then the elite expands. As more people get education, more people get... The important thing is, at that point, the system should be willing to accept those newcomers, so that they also mount the ladder. It shouldn't withdraw the ladder at that point. Countries that withdraw the ladder get stuck. This is the so-called middle income trap, something that Mexico for many years was allegedly in. And we have to make sure we're not in that trap. So what I think we need to do, and this is the language that you hear nowadays across the board, we need to make it easier for people to start enterprises. We need to make it easier for them to get credit. So small and medium-sized businesses should get credit more easily, which means improve your frameworks, improve your institutional structure. So influence will always be there in any society. You can see the United States, there's plenty of influence there. Why is it that two families have dominated the presidency over the last few years?
Will dominate again, apparently.
Perhaps dominate once more. So that doesn't necessarily mean the system is biased against the others. It is, people have gotten familiar with those. What we have to do is make the system more accessible to everybody. And that's what we need to work on. If you do that, the crony capitalism itself will die out and be replaced by a more free enterprise system.
One of the, actually, just carry on from that question, the few that have crony capitalism, the real estate companies, the many large corporates that are now badly in debt, it's difficult for them to grow any further because they are so highly leveraged. So then you have these new... I loved your speech at FICCI, I really did, except I felt you were a little offhandish about new media, Twitter, Facebook, e-commerce. Now, e-commerce are young kids like these guys. I'm sure most of them are thinking of that. And they don't need no politician, they don't need no Reserve Bank governor. They will show you the way. No crony capitalism. Isn't that a welcome thing?
Absolutely,
young entrepreneurs.
absolutely. I was not in any way disrespecting these businesses.
Now you're saying it in front of these youngsters.
No. Read my speech or hear my speech. No, what I was saying is, relative to the inventions that happened at the beginning of the 20th century, the motor car, the aeroplane, telephone, these were enormous inventions compared to Twitter and Facebook. 140 characters sending around your tweets is interesting, is fun, but does it compare with a motor car in terms of innovations that set us forward? I mean, call me an old fogey, but I think the motor car wins out. So in that sense, I was saying that it should not be surprising that productivity has not increased as much as perhaps at that time in the 20s and the 30s. And therefore, it led to a long sort of discourse in which I said maybe productivity, at least for now, is
I think what everybody will slightly object to, including me, is that to try and use only Twitter and Facebook as an example of the new technologies. They're just their side. Yeah. There's Internet of Things now, there's e-commerce, and e-commerce. I just found A lady housewife, 45, 50-year-old, who couldn't ever go into a supermarket because she didn't have the connections, she is now selling 20 crores a year of saris from Surat on Snapdeal, Facebook, and Amazon and Flipkart.
No.
I mean, the amount of it's a platform, it's a supermarket in the sky for anybody. It's creating employment. But will we, as India, allow it to become Alibaba, or are we going to stop it?
So there are tremendous possibilities, and I see that, and I understand. I mean, your example is for somebody to be able to sit in a remote area and sell to the world based on this kind of technology is wonderful, and we should encourage it. In terms of what we can do to encourage that kind of thing, we certainly have to recognize new technologies when they come and make adjustments for the fact that they operate in a different way. Now, a classic example was a little bit of a tiff we had with Uber, where they were using a way of bypassing our regulations to conduct transactions overseas, which were in violation of a few regulations that we have. Our point was, look, we understand the problem you're trying to solve. We're willing to work to try and solve that. In fact, we have some solutions which are coming up on doing low-value transactions without too much janjat, as they call it. But the point is, you can't violate regulations. If we are a country which is going to turn a blind eye to a violation of regulations, no matter who you are, you know, then we don't have rule of law. And one of the things we need to do to avoid the crony capitalism is have rule of law. So our point was, obey the regulation. We'll work with you to fix it, to make it more useful for what you're trying to do.
That's great to have a positive attitude, because you don't find that generally. You just say, look, shut down, but you're going to change or fine-tune regulations so that it becomes in tune with the current new technologies.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, that's great to hear. So in that context, anybody here planning to go into e-commerce and into the new... Here's a young man there. Yes.
My question is not exactly related to e-commerce, but to a more important topic of bitcoins.
Bitcoins.
Nothing more important than e-commerce.
No, bitcoins is fascinating.
And reading your book, Fault Lines, it comes out as somebody who is not pro-government intervention. Being from the Chicago School of Thought, you propagate more free markets. So I want to know, and bitcoins has specifically very good advantages for a developing nation. And so I want to know, what is your view as a regulator on free banking and having more of equitable currencies floating in the market?
See, I think we're still watching the evolution of these kinds of currencies. One of the problems that we envisaged with Bitcoin, one of course was the securities issues, and you've seen that they're not as secure as people thought they were, and there have been stolen Bitcoins and so on. But the second issue was the fluctuation in value. For money, you require something which is a stable store of value, and something that fluctuates so much is less effective in use as money. There are some lessons to be learned from the technologies that Bitcoin has employed. Some of them are useful, some of them are worrisome. And we have to see how we take on board such technologies. I have no doubt that down the line, we will be moving towards primarily a cashless society, okay? And we'll have some kinds of currencies like this which will be at work. For us as the Reserve Bank, this may happen maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now, but we'll have to figure out how we make money, because you know, the way we generate most of our revenue is through forms of seigniorage. People are willing to hold currency free of interest, and that's how we make money. And but we'll figure that out. But I think that these virtual currencies will certainly get much better, much safer, and over time will be the form of transaction. That's for sure.
And India will adopt them at some point. We're not going to reject them out of hand.
You know, in a sense, credit cards are already performing some of that role. You know, the amount of rupees that flow through your hands, I presume, are far less than used to before credit cards. Yes. And so this is going to go all round. We're going to have near-field contact devices. You just tap and go. I mean, all that we want to permit.
You want to permit?
We want to permit. I mean, we're not saying we're going to lose money, therefore we won't do it. We'll find some other way of getting money. Maybe government will fund us eventually.
Oh, no, that will be a nightmare. Okay, coming to government funding. Sorry, you had a question, ma'am.
From that, and I was, what happens when there is an absence of government bailout guarantee, and then do we enter into another crisis? Do we modify our expectations? What happens in the long term in such a situation where there is no guarantee that the government will bail you out?
Bail us as a Reserve Bank or bail banks out?
No, banks out. So,
well, I think many in the West now feel bad that their banks had to be bailed out, which is why they're trying to constrain their banks even more to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think that we have to try and reduce the risks in financial systems, which is why one of the objectives of a central bank is financial stability. Now, can you say never? Will some entity not go down ever? I think if you're in such a fail-safe system, you're probably taking too few risks. Yeah. So we have to allow for some failure, but not systemic failure. How do we prevent systemic failure? That's what all of our central bankers meet every 2 months to try and figure out. So it's work in progress.
So is a systemic failure coming? You 6 months ago you said it might come, maybe a bubble.
Well, again, what I said and what was reported was a little different. But what I said was there's a higher risk of volatility as we exited the very accommodative monetary conditions that we have. There has been a lot of money that has flown in search of yield to emerging markets, to junk bonds, to a whole lot of risky instruments. And as interest rates start picking up in the core economies, you will see some of that money flow back. And the question is, when it flows back, are there big asset price changes, and who's sort of left exposed when those asset price changes occur?
So you're really saying that countries like India are more susceptible to this volatility?
I mean, emerging markets are typically susceptible. I like to think that we've made major improvements since we experienced the last bout of volatility in July of last year, July, August of last year. We have more reserves. We have a much smaller current account deficit. Oil is very helpful in this regard, and we'll see an improvement going forward in the current account deficit. And inflation is lower, so our currency has more respectability because the inflation associated with it is significantly lower. These are all, and tie that finally to the fiscal consolidation part the government has, and hopefully we're at the beginning of a period of stronger growth. So put all that together, we look different from the other emerging markets. I am hopeful that after an initial bout of volatility, if the world is seized by volatility, we will come through and people will start putting their money back.
But don't you feel that for money to come to India, the story has to be a good story, and our growth is appalling, and people are beginning to wonder, can India really do it? And in that sense, if I may be harsh, did you miss the bus a little bit? Do you regret not having lowered interest rates the last time? Because oil prices crashed, inflation rates are down to near zero in WPI. I know you go by CPI, which is a smaller index, but it is the world norm. If you could rewind.
No, I don't think we've missed any boat. So you're
because you couldn't forecast oil prices going down. That was tough.
No, but we've seen some oil price trend, fall already, and one of the key concerns everybody should be asking is how long is it going to stay low? Yeah. Because at some point,
gosh, you're a conservative.
People are going to. No, that's my focus is not on oil prices.
But it's helping our inflation rate come down.
It's helping, and what we have to do is, once we are sure that the disinflationary process is well underway, we will have the ability to be more accommodative in a sustainable way. So that's the message I've been sending, that we don't want to flip-flop back and forth. Okay, this month's inflation was 2%, therefore I'll cut this much. Oh, it went up to 5%, maybe I should increase this. That's not how a central bank operates. It takes a view, And unless things change dramatically from that view, it proceeds on a process of either accommodation or tightening. And that is what I'd like to see happen.
But haven't things changed dramatically now? Hasn't the process started? I mean,
See,
aren't you convinced of that?
Yeah. I'm enjoined not to comment on monetary policy in between meetings. You've read our last statement. You'll read the next one.
Very sensible.
And,
Never answer the media. Correct. I agree with you.